Hello and welcome back to the CommRadio NFL Draft Show. We'd like to welcome a special guest onto the show to preview this year's draft a little more in depth. Please welcome NFL Network insider Ian Rapoport. Ian, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. What's happening, guys?
Not much. We're actually going to get started with a little SEC action and start with the LSU Tigers. So Jamal Adams cut his 40-yard dash time down to 4.38 seconds after recording a 4.58 at the Combine. How drastically does this improve his draft stock, and do you think he could potentially crack into the top 5 in the first round?
Yeah, I really do think he could go in the top 5. And, you look at his draft stock, a lot of it depends on not just what kind of a player he is, but what some of those teams think of the overall value of the safety position. That's kind of an issue for him, and it's honestly, it's been an issue for a lot of players all the way through from Eric Berry on down. I don't think it's a stretch to say Jamal Adams is one of the best just football players in this draft. It's really a question of, how highly do you value the safety position? Similar to running back, it's basically like, let's say you're the Chicago Bears. You need secondary help. You think he's a great player. Are we really going to draft a safety that high? Now, the fact that he ran so fast, maybe they say, we can play him at corner 2. Maybe they say he's that dynamic of a player, it's okay. But it's really a question more of the value of the position over anything else.
So, Ian, staying on the defensive side of the ball, Reuben Foster is one of the most highly regarded prospects in the draft. But do you think that his Combine incident will hurt his draft stock, or is it not a major concern in the eyes of NFL executives?
I don't think that specifically will hurt it. I do think it will force teams to ask some legitimate questions. And that's okay, because every prospect has some things where they say, all right, teams are going to ask about this. How am I going to handle it? And, for Reuben Foster, he's going to have to answer it. And, the answer might just be, I got really frustrated. I shouldn't have, used those words and, had the incident happen. I think that would be fair, but, it's really going to cause teams to do a lot more homework. The other thing is, I think it's pretty safe to say he's a top 10 pick. He's not someone who rushes the passer. So, does a little character question take an off-the-ball linebacker out of the top 10? I don't know, but I know teams are going to be asking themselves that question.
Speaking of teams with question marks, the Tennessee Titans have taken offensive linemen in the first round 3 of the last 4 years. What position of need do you think that Tennessee really needs to fill this year, and will they potentially move one of their first 2 rounders in some sort of trade?
I would be stunned if they do not move their first rounders in a trade. They love to move. It's just they love it. They're very flexible. They're very open. They consider everything. I think John Robinson is one of the more sort of a new breed of young, open-minded GM. So, yeah, I think they will move somewhere. I think it's crazy that a team with that much talent has the 5th pick. It just rarely happens. But the best thing about them is they actually don't have to do anything. Look at their roster. You could say, they need a receiver. Yeah, they need a receiver. But they don't need him at 5. They have the luxury of saying, we're just going to take the best guy and we'll see what happens there and we'll figure it out, because they've done such a good job of roster building over the last couple of years, really over the last year, that they don't need anything, which is exactly where you want to get to heading into a draft.
So, looking at something that Tennessee really doesn't need, taking a look at a few top-tier running backs, let's talk about Dalvin Cook and Leonard Fournette. Between the 2 of them, who do you think is more NFL ready, and who do you think will come off the board first?
I think Fournette will come off the board first. He's got fewer concerns. He's a monster. He's a big name. And after catching the ball like he did at his pro day, I'm not sure where the weakness is. I thought he looked, and just talking to scouts there, looked really good catching the ball naturally. That was big for him. So I think that was one thing. As far as Cook, I think he's going to go high. I'd be really surprised if he's not in the top 15. I'll say that. Really surprised, but there are some character questions teams are going to have to get to the bottom of. now he's so talented. He's such a complete back that, maybe teams will be okay with it. But my guess is because he's more polished and more ready and more of a sort of complete power back, I would think that Fournette goes a little bit higher.
Ian, moving over to the quarterback position, do you think that the Arizona Cardinals could potentially draft a successor to Carson Palmer in this year's draft?
Yeah, I really do. And I think they kind of hope they do also. And that's one of the things this year is they have such a great situation where Carson's coming back. If Carson wasn't coming back, they would have to get their guy. They'd have to get their quarterback. But Carson comes back at least a year, and then you say, you know what? Let's get a quarterback, and he can sit for a year or two, and we'll figure it out. And, they're another team like the Titans where they don't need anything. I'm sure they could get better a bunch of places. They don't actually need anything. So, they can take, say, Deshaun Kaiser and go, you know what? We'll see you in a year. I kind of think they hope to do that.
So a lot of the big boards have Mitch Trubisky as the top quarterback available, and Cardinals head coach Bruce Arians said he was bugged by Trubisky's lack of starting experience. How concerned are you with Mitch's lack of starting experience?
Yeah, I think that's a concern. And it doesn't mean that he's bad. I mean, we've seen quarterbacks come in and be successful without a lot of experience. If we consider Ryan Tannehill a successful quarterback, which I think we do, he had a similar pedigree. But, there's really a couple questions with Trubisky. There's why wasn't he a starter the year before last year? Like, why couldn't he beat out anybody? That's the problem. And I think the other thing is when he played really good teams, he didn't seem to get better. He seemed to get worse. Trubisky is a big name, and I think he's pretty well regarded. But if you're going to take him in the first round, you're going to take him really high, you're going to have to be okay with some things. And that's, just say it's going to take some really good talent evaluation to figure out what you really think of him.
Sticking with the theme, Bill O'Brien of the Houston Texans talked a lot last week about how hard it is for first-year quarterbacks to have success. Do you think there's any QBs in this year's draft that can come in and compete at a high level in their first season?
It's possible, because I'm sure if you asked me this question last year, I would not have said Dak Prescott would come in and play right away, but he looked fantastic and looked probably as NFL ready as you could imagine. I think you got to get in the right system, but maybe because of how well put together he is, maybe Deshaun Watson is in that mix. But in this group of quarterbacks, it's good. I mean, I think coaches really like it, but as far as being NFL ready, you'd have to have a ready-made, stacked roster like the Cowboys have, at least on offense, to have someone come in and play right away.
Moving back to the topic of Deshaun Kaiser, we saw glimpses of stardom back in 2015, but is Deshaun Kaiser ready for the NFL? Will he fall outside of the first round, or do you think that he's going to manage to keep himself in there?
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he fell out of the first round. I wouldn't be surprised to see him go in the top 10. Just talent-wise, there's a lot of things that a lot of people really like. I mean, talent-wise, he might be the most talented of the quarterbacks. There's inconsistency questions, maybe some work ethic questions. I think he's going to do well. I think he'll get his name called early. I really do.
All right, Ian, just a few rapid-fire questions left for you. Obviously,
all right,
Myles Garrett is the guy that everyone talks about as the best player in this draft, but do you have a potential sleeper pick in this year's draft that could really make a difference in rounds 4 to 7?
In rounds 4 to 7, ooh, that's tough. We'll see where Cooper Kupp goes. Small school receiver, tough dude, put on a show at the combine. I think he probably goes higher, but let's pencil him in as a little bit of a sleeper.
Laramie Tunsil last year slid way down in the first round if he was expected to go in top 5. Which big prospect will slide farther than expected this year?
Oh, man, there's so much to develop between now and then. I would say this, keep an eye on some of the injured guys. A lot of injuries maybe are worse than we realize, and that caused a guy to fall. And once one team starts passing, another team starts passing, similar to Miles Jack. So I would say keep an eye on some of the injured guys.
So a guy like Malik Hooker.
I think he'll probably be okay. But there's some other. We'll see what happens when teams really get a look at some of these injured guys.
Alrighty, Ian, thank you so much for joining us today. Guys, make sure to follow Ian on Twitter. His Twitter handle is @RapSheet. You can see Ian throughout the week on NFL Network's Up to the Minute at 5 p.m. Eastern and NFL Total Access at 7 p.m. Eastern. That's all from us here at Innovation Park. Stick around for more coverage of the 2017 NFL Draft right here on CommRadio.